then we have Spider-Man in 2001. But they keep laughing at me. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
We
keep laughing.
We have to stop.
Just pause. Look in the chat.
Oh my goodness. This is gold. This is gold, guys.
I hadn't read it yet. I just knew the email. And so when you told me to look it up, I started reading it and I'm like, yes, correct. How do we address this?
This is amazing. I think we just read it straight. I can do a dramatic reading of this.
All right. If you want to.
I mean, what do we got? We're not putting any words in his mouth, so he's.
I don't want him to think we're making fun of him. That's what I'm worried about.
I mean, he listens to the show enough that he would be able to tell that we're, you know, we would be making fun of him as much as we make fun of each other.
Is this real? Like, is this just a long? Is this a long?
This feels like a rant in a Quentin Tarantino movie that some side character has. Maybe that's how I should intro it.
I don't know, man. I don't. He's the only person that we know listens to every episode. So if we read it,
what the fuck?
I could just if we want, I could just sum it up and not make it so that it's this rambling whatever this is. I love it. I think it's awesome. I think it's hilarious.
I think maybe sum it up. Talk about how he has some really big thoughts about Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Yeah, because then we could talk about how it really tickled us without it being,
Don't say the N-word around baby wolf in meaning nap, but still wolf.
I mean, that's legit funny. That's legit funny that he brings it up that way.
The final sentence, though, just so at that moment, everyone realizes they aren't running from some monster.
A baby that needs love and care.
Just that whole quick scene brings a tears to my eye. I think maybe you gotta quote that.
I'm gonna quote that last point there. We'll be good.
All right,
Brandon. Well, Brandon said he couldn't hear us all of a sudden. So Craig's still recording, but do we?
Oh shit! Yeah, where'd Brandon?
He's gone. Craig's recording, but he's gone. Or no, wait, is Craig not recording? He's like, yeah, Craig's recording, but Brandon is gone. Are you here, Brandon?
Brandon, can you hear me?
No, he doesn't have a.
Dimitri. Fuck, my phone died.
He doesn't have a camera, but. Brandon, blink twice if you can hear us.
It was just poor Jeff.
What are you guys laughing?
Let's talk about our first experiences. Let me give you some insight into Frank Miller, Batman Year One. Steven,
I had this whole thing queued up, man. I've been thinking about this all week, and you guys just sabotaged my entire story about how this film came to be.
He says, I'm having audio issues on my end. Keep going, you're good. So what I say, we just count us in again and we start over and maybe start with summing up the email.
We have to make sure we edit this bit out, though.
Yes.
All right.
So you want to start over completely from the top, or just from
I mean,
the
we only
point?
had like 3 minutes recorded before before you had to stop.
Okay.
There was kind of the funny bit about the email thing, though, like the way it came up.
All right. Well,
I say you just go back to the Frank Miller thing.
Well, I'll just come back in and be like, sorry, we had to stop and get the laughs out because they were laughing about something else. Okay. All right.
Yeah, because then we can include some of it of you being like, "What the fuck's going on?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. In 5, 4.
Are you suggesting that someone's trying to make a real-life sequel?
Stab 2? Who'd want to do that? Sequels suck.
No, come on, man.
Oh, please. By definition alone, they're inferior films.
Bullshit generalization. Many sequels have surpassed their original.
Oh, yeah?
Name one.
I'll be back.
Freedom, you're my older brother, and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again. Never.
I just can't believe you came here and do it again.
You guys give up or you're thirsty for more?
Welcome in to Season 4, Episode 13 of Duel of the Greats. And you, my friends, were just listening to our unfiltered reaction to one of the funniest emails we have ever received. We talked about it a little bit last week on the pod, but friend of the pod, I think we can officially call Nicholas a friend of the pod, wrote us one of the funniest emails ever. Some of the highlights, talking about the movie Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. I think my favorite still is that now I don't know what it is about watching that movie now, but the scene when the baby is shot and electrocuted by the Hard Rock Cafe giant guitar and he begins to cry. I start to get teary-eyed. I never used to get teary-eyed before, but now I do. If you want to follow Nicholas, we've had a chance to get to know him a little bit better via social media. He is Rizzy Vision on TikTok. That's RIZZI Vision on TikTok and Instagram. He has some very funny stand-up comedy clips. So if you get a chance, definitely check him out. And thank you again, Nicholas, for being a friend of the pod. We are Duel of the Greats. And if you would like to find us on social media, we are at Duel of the Greats everywhere that you go to social media, except for TikTok, where we are at Duel Podcast. And we have got a tremendous show for you tonight, one I am very excited about. It's a Scream, baby. We are going to be looking at Scream 1 and Scream 2, classics in the horror genre. Now, longtime listeners know that I'm not a big fan of horror films, but part of the reason I wanted to host tonight is because Scream is my all-time favorite horror franchise. I'm a huge fan of it. These movies initially came out when I was pretty young, like 10 and 11, so I had to discover them in high school. But I'm curious about when you guys first saw these movies and began to appreciate them, because I didn't really get around till I was in high school, and ever since then I've been a huge fan of every movie that comes out.
A quick question for you, as you say that Scream is your favorite horror movie franchise. Does it have any competition?
I like Halloween.
Franchise that
Yeah,
you even know?
I like Halloween a lot too. Yeah, I probably like Halloween a lot, and yeah, beyond that, no, there's no there's no other competition.
Not Hellraiser? I didn't convince you?
You did not convince me with Hellraiser. I think the problem is Hellraiser is just too uplifting and too life affirming to the point that
it's too positive.
Yeah, it's almost too positive of a portrayal of the human condition that I just can't get into it as a horror, horror genre.
Not enough sex either. Not enough
exactly. Yeah.
Just
so Scream, as you guys know, exactly. Scream, as you guys know, reinvented the horror genre. It's important to place it in context because when the movie Scream first came out, it's funny you brought up Hellraiser, and I brought up Halloween. Most horror films by the mid-1990s were just sort of these like regurgitated sequel of a sequel of a sequel.
DVD.
straight to video. We got, Jason X and Curse of Michael Myers, and they were on Nightmare on Elm Street like 6 or 7 or so. It's there were a lot of these movies, and Scream really kind of reinvented the entire genre. All new characters. I think a really, really crucial aspect of these movies that I love is that it kind of, instead of being sort of this, all of the, and I made a TikTok about this a few months ago on Halloween. All the horror genres kind of have their go-to villains. What I think is so inventive about Scream is that the anyone can be Ghostface. And so it's supplied this element of who done it. There's kind of this detective fiction that the character is somebody, the killer is somebody that they know. So rather than have a Michael Myers constantly coming back to life and chasing the same people in the same movies, these characters are dealing with different killers in every single movie, and I think that's something really unique about the Scream franchise. But like I was saying, these movies came out when I was pretty young, the first two, when I was like 10 and 11 years old. So I didn't really discover them until high school and fell in love with them very quickly. Jeff, start us off. When did you first kind of, because you're a big horror movie guy, when did you first see these movies and kind of have them enter your world?
Yeah, so I'm a big horror guy now, but I wasn't always. I saw Leprechaun when I was really young. Scared the crap out of me, and I did not watch horror movies for a long time. Um, so not till about like 10 years ago, I would say, that I really started getting back into it. But Scream was a little different. It felt more like a thriller at the time, and I think it was kind of marketed that way because they wanted to distance themselves from like horror movie, even though it's kind of hard to do when you have Wes Craven attached to it. But he was also a little bit of legitimacy because even though Nightmare on Elm Street had fallen off, the Wes Craven version of Nightmare on Elm Street, was still good, but that was long gone. So he was still. I actually think the same year. Steve, you might know. New Nightmare came out around the
It
same
was
time as the
it was the
first
year
Scream.
it was the year before. So he did
Okay,
New
so
Nightmare
that
in
sort of
95, and then yeah,
reinvigorated
yep.
Nightmare on Elm Street, and but the not only did it sort of reinvigorate the horror genre, but I think it also invented a sort of subgenre of the teen horror flick, which was just everywhere after this. Because then you get your I Know What You Did Last Summers, and your Wolf Creeks, and Wrong Turn, and all those horror franchises that are all sort of that teen.
Well, and the screenwriter here, Kevin Williamson,
Yep.
is everywhere. He's ubiquitous. In fact,
He
he
owned the
writes
90s.
he writes Halloween H2O. I mean, he becomes
Yeah.
such an influence that they actually bring him in to
He's
sort
the
of
creator of
revamp.
Dawson's Creek,
Yeah. So
which
he's
shows you
become
just how much he was.
yeah, he is everywhere. And certainly
And he's
still I
back.
think credits. Yeah, I know he's back.
Writing and
And he does,
directing Scream 7.
yeah. So, and he's a great writer, and I think he's written, I think everyone would agree that these screenplays were so original, and just so,
Very,
so
he,
different than
he's a
anything.
very different in terms of the horror genre, but I think his writing style is very 90s, very Kevin Smith, very Quentin Tarantino, very dialogue heavy, very fast paced, chippy, or not chippy, snippy dialogue. It was very much the rage in the 90s. And there were only a few that were sort of able to transcend. Even Aaron Sorkin, to a degree, is kind of along those lines. But to answer your initial question, when did I see it? Um, I saw it shortly after, like when it came out on video. I had older sisters, and they were in like the prime age for that. They would have been like 14, 15 when that came out. And then, back then they didn't come out. It wasn't like 45 days in the theater, it was like 2 years before it comes out on video. So, you know, um, they were probably 16, 17 when it finally came out. And so then I watched it with them. And yeah, that was the kind of first time. And I liked it, even though even though I had been scared by Leprechaun, I still enjoyed the Scream, and it was like you said, it was a unique by adding the I don't necessarily think the conceit of the Ghostface identity is. I agree with you on the uniqueness. I don't necessarily know that I like it as much as you do, but in terms of it being a novel approach to the killer, it definitely was and still is. Really, it's kind of the one thing that really sort of kind of separates that franchise from just the typical Jason, Freddy, etc. of the world.
Well, and I think that there are, people have, and myself included, have their rankings of all the Scream movies. Um, but I think most people would say that part of the way that the franchise has been able to stay so fresh is for that reason, that it's a different, each movie is its own self-contained mystery. It's to have a different killer in every movie. Obviously a lot of the characters, appear in a lot of the movies. Most, Sydney Prescott is in most of them, all of them except the most recent one. But I think she's coming back for 7. She is, because I've seen the trailer. But yeah, I think, again, just to have a self-contained story for every single movie, I think is what kind of makes it unique and has kept the franchise relatively fresh, in a way that maybe other horror franchises haven't. Steve, when did
she
you?
was not in. Sorry,
Yeah,
she was not in
no,
6.
She's not in the New
I
York
watched
one.
6 for the first time last year, but was Courtney Cox though?
Courtney Cox is, yeah. Courtney Cox is in it. But yeah,
then Nev Campbell was in 5.
Yes, it was a big contract thing.
She's a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it was a big contract thing, and they've gotten her back. Rightfully so. They should be paying Nev Campbell whatever she wants for the Scream franchise, in my opinion. Steve, when did you? I've never really discussed Scream that much with you. When did you kind of first encounter these movies?
That is because I didn't see them until like 2023, 2022. Yeah, it's very recently, post-pandemic for sure. One of these spooky seasons, I decided to watch them all. It was before the 5th one came out though, so I haven't seen 5, 6, or obviously 7. Yeah, they're movies. They're horror movies. We can talk more on the other side.
Nailed it.
I feel like, yeah, he nailed it. They are. They are horror movies.
Well, this is the kind of cutting, biting insight that you come to this podcast for.
This is why we were robbed of the Golden Globe for Best Podcast, right there.
Yeah,
we
were
robbed.
We weren't even nominated. It's honestly, a lot of our fan have said that we should have been nominated. So,
I know how Leonardo DiCaprio feels getting robbed all those years before he finally won.
You look a lot like him too. So I mean,
that's
really
that's what I've been told.
Our lives are almost exactly like his, dare I say. So I think we've all felt that pain. So, but without further ado, so Steve is actually going to be defending the first film. The reason we are going to, because there are a lot of these movies, I will just offer a quick context.
Justify yourself, because this was your
idea. I am going to justify myself. So, like, I'll be totally transparent. I am a Scream 4 fanatic. I think it's one of the best horror films ever made. That's not one we're covering tonight. Here's the reason we're not covering it. Because I can even accept that Scream 1 and 2 are the most critically acclaimed of this franchise. And they are certainly the most popular. They're the two that made the most money of the franchise. And I think that when we think of this franchise, they're kind of the two most definitive. And Scream 2, from a critical standpoint, was really the one that still to this day a lot of people would say, and a lot of film critics would say, was the one that came closest to equaling the first one, or even bettering the first one, as we will determine tonight. So I know you've got a lot of rankings. Maybe at the end of the episode, we might kind of give our individual rankings if they have them, or I'll give mine if people want them. But for tonight, we're just going to focus on 1 and 2. So without further ado, you know how it works here. We're going to hear from Steve, who's defending the first Scream, released in 1996. He'll give us some points, and then Jeff will take it away with Scream 2. And then I have a pretty big decision to make. So, Steve, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
All right. So the first and most important reason why Scream 1 should win over the first or over Scream 2 is Stu and Billy. We're spoiling everything here, by the way, which if you've gotten this far into our podcasts and you haven't figured that out, well, shame. But Stu and Billy, who wind up being the killers, the first one, and they also, spoiler, die in this movie. And having not seen Scream 5 or 6, I don't think they come back in those, but I guess there's still a chance. So I think they're still dead.
In ghost form, Billy comes back and
spoiler.
In ghost form, he talks to one of the characters is his daughter. And so they get what's his name? Skeet Ulrich back and he kind of plays a ghostly version of the father who talks to his daughter.
Okay. Kind of like, he's like Darth Vader.
It's exactly the same. In fact, a lot of
ghost face, if you will.
Yes.
A
lot of crossover.
I love it.
A lot of crossover between the diehard Star Wars fans and the diehard Scream fans. They were really happy about that. But yeah, sorry. Please continue. Stu and Billy.
Yeah, Stu and Billy. So not only are they the killers and they're good characters and their goofiness and psychopathy. That's a word, right? They're psychopaths. So it's psychopathy. Is that a thing? Regardless, they're psychos.
Psychopath.
We're gonna call it a thing. Yep.
They're just bringing an energy that nobody in the second movie has. I don't think anybody comes close. Not even Timothy Olyphant. It's kind of an unhinged level of menace that they even a few times call out. There is no motive that makes it even scarier. I don't think it's all that particularly scary. In fact, I think a lot of this movie is tongue in cheek, which I think they intended it that way too. It's designed for laughs. But to the extent that it is scary and that there is menace, Skeet Ulrich in particular as Billy is kind of driving that. He's got a wild, terrifying charisma to him in this movie. And then Stu, played by Matthew Lillard, he's on another one. He's just one of those weird dudes that you don't want to be around because you don't know what they're going to do next. And anyway, Stu and Billy and Stu Bill, as I call them. I don't call them that, but maybe they call each other that. It's hard to say. And then, no, that's it. That's all I'm going to give you. Stu and Billy and Stu.
Rebuttal, Jeff.
I'm going to leave it there because that sort of dovetails with one of my points.
All right, Steve, your next point. You may proceed.
Point number 2 is Randy Meeks, the character played by Jamie Kennedy. Yes, he's in the second movie as well. And he does do a little bit of the same, fills some of the same role, which is our, essentially the Greek chorus of our horror movie here, where he's kind of narrating, but also giving us a kind of a breaking the fourth wall, peeking behind the curtain. He's the one that lets us in that this is kind of a meta narrative and, commentary on the horror genre. He knows what type of movie he's in. And the scenes with him, especially the one in the movie store, the Blockbuster / movie gallery / whatever, mom and pop movie store, where he lays out there are rules to this. This is a horror movie and there are rules. I love that. And it strikes the perfect tone, I think what they were aiming for with this movie. And I think I've read this in interviews and stuff. It is kind of a winking nod towards horror, as a genre. They're paying homage to and also poking fun at the horror genre. And he's the only one, I think, of our characters that survive, I think, that seems to know that. And he's just awesome. I could watch a movie. He also he's like that archetype. Somebody I saw on social media a couple weeks ago, they're like, nobody looks like this anymore. And it was the kid from American Pie, the redhead that God, what's his name? That it's just kind of like the weird Shermanator, yeah. Kind of like the weird dopey friend that's not like actually friends with a lot of people, but he's always kind of like He either is not all knowing, but he has some words of wisdom sometimes, and it's not necessarily the best friend archetype, but it's kind of, I don't know. I feel like Jamie Kennedy does a good job playing that role in this. So Randy Meeks, number 2. And they kill him in the second one. Spoiler, which is unforgivable.
Any rebuttal to that one, Jeff?
Yeah, my rebuttal to that one would be not only is he in the second one, but I would argue that he is in fact better in the second one. He gets more screen time because he, as you mentioned, he was kind of in the first one he was kind of a little bit like he was part of the crew, but kind of just on the outside a little bit. But then because the crew gets thinned out a little bit from the first movie, so Randy's position has increased in the second movie, and then he goes to college with him. Um, and then he and Timothy Oliphant have their fun little sparring. They literally do our podcast in the movie. The entire movie, it's a running joke between movie versus sequel and which ones are better. And Terminator, Terminator 2, and Godfather Part 2, and Star Wars, Empire Strikes. I mean, they basically go through the entire list of our show. And I mean, we have it in the intro, of course. So it's
I'm going to say keen listeners may have noticed.
Yes. So it's yeah, I think that little dynamic and the fact that he's a little bit more part of the group and gets a little bit more time to shine, because I agree with what you're saying about his character, that he's you can argue that both Timothy Oliphant and Matthew Lillard provide some good comic relief, but there's that sort of Jamie Kennedy has, whatever he's become today, the at the time there was a sort of earnestness to his humor, and the way he played characters that made it feel sort of genuine in a way that it was natural, even though everything he's saying is completely ridiculous and silly. And I think that's just like at its peak in the second one, even to a different level than the first one.
Okay. Steve, your final point?
Point number 3. I really struggled with what to make this. I thought about doing Rose McGowan as Dewey's sister. I can't remember her first name in this, but she's a fun character.
Tatum.
Yeah.
And a little Easter egg, if you've seen the trailer for the 7th film, Sidney Prescott's daughter's name is Tatum.
Oh,
She's
really?
clearly named her daughter after her high school friend who was viciously murdered. Sorry, continue. Tatum is her name.
Stepping on my point. Viciously murdered, he says. Yes, she did get murdered, but she also didn't go down like a scrub like a lot of people in these movies. She knows what type of movie she's in, too. She fights back, man. She chucks these beer bottles at Ghostface. She tries to get away from... I mean, she's actually fighting for her life. Now, the decision to go through the doggy door, probably not her shining moment. I mean, if she had that to do over, I think she'd probably do that over. But she's just a fun character, and so I was gonna go with her. I also was gonna go with the Fonz. The Fonz is in this, and I mean, how can you vote against the Fonz? That's just un-American. But ultimately, I decided that I think I just like the ending of this one better, and I think you should too. The ending of Scream 2 just gets too far out over its skis. Too many things happen. They try to get too cute, and there are too many reveals, too many aha, it's actually this person. Aha, it was actually that person. Aha, this person's not dead. At one point, there's, I think, like 6 or 7 characters. Maybe it's, let me think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there's like 6 or 7 characters all up on the stage at the end of the second one, even in corpse form. It's just too much. They tried to get too cute. The ending of Scream, the first one, while a lot does happen, it's still fairly self-contained, and you actually get a motive revealed why Billy did this. Because he's upset because his mom, is it his mom? No, his dad was cheating on Sydney's mom, right? Or cheating with Sydney's mom. So you get that reveal, and then there's no big mask pull after that. There's no big aha, it was actually Colonel Mustard in the dining room with the candlestick. They do a little bit of the people pop up after they're supposed to be dead thing, but it's not quite to the same level. So reason number 3 is just it's a tighter ending. It's more satisfactory, and it has less rug pulls. So that's why you should pick it.
Jeff, would you like to rebut that point, or do you just want to jump right into your 3 points?
I can give a quick rebuttal. So it may be tighter in the sense that it's not as long, but I do think that it's still it still bites off quite a lot. I don't know that either one bites off more than it can chew, if you will, but because I mean, we got the dad coming back in the first one, and he's all tied up, and then we got Dewey, we got Gail, we got everybody's involved there at the end. So it's it's not as quite as many rug pulls, but then I would argue that the reason there are so many rug pulls is because it's sort of um, playing off of the first one.
That's my point. It feels like it needs to one up everything. The best sequels we talk about are ones where they feel like they're an extension of it, and they have their own reason for being. Scream 2 just feels like, let's do Scream but bigger.
Well, because I think it's poking fun at the sort of ending. Not only that the first, because the whole like what I sort of think makes Scream great, or at least interesting as a franchise, is how they really play off this meta narrative, right? And I think if I had to guess, I would guess that's why you like Scream 4 so much, because of the I mean, there's Turtles all the way down with this. It's Ghostface all the way down with Scream 4. There's so many sort of meta, circular things that come back around, and so I think that's what the third one I think most would agree sucks, and I think part of that
it has its defenders. It's generally considered one of the weaker entries. Yes,
and I think part of it is because it gets away from that sort of kind of wraparound meta aspect, and then just starts to sort of play into straight horror thriller territory. And so it's like, well, this doesn't really feel as unique as the other Scream movies do. And I think that's why they sort of went back to it in a big way with Scream 4. I also don't know if Scream 3 was written by Kevin Williamson, but we're not talking about Scream 3 anyway.
Scream 3, I will say it was not written by Kevin Williamson. So a lot of people pointed that out. Scream 4, Williamson came back and wrote Scream 4.
All right. Well, then I'll jump into my points if it pleases the court.
Indeed, it does. Proceed, counselor.
So we already kind of hit on this a little bit with the whole Jamie Kennedy angle, but I think just to broaden it up, when we talk about the dynamics of the cast, I think those dynamics are better in the second movie than they are the first movie. Now, the first of all, I forgot how many sort of young actors there are that at the time I would have had no idea because they weren't really famous, but now I know because they're in so many other things. Like Portia de Rossi played a sorority girl. Rebecca Gayheart was also in that same sorority. We had young Jerry O'Connell. We had young Timothy Oliphant. Like all these names that we know now, they were not. This was '97, I think, so they were not the names then that they are now. So it's kind of interesting then to go back and see, especially because a lot of them are bigger than like Nev Campbell or Courtney Cox now, but definitely were not at the time, which is interesting. But regardless, I think because, and be trying careful when I explain this, but because of the success of Scream 1, they were able to sort of entice some other actors into Scream 2, and I think that made the cast dynamics when you throw in a Timothy Oliphant and a Jerry O'Connell and you get those other people involved, then I think that dynamic is more fun in the first movie because Skeet Ulrich, he's kind of mopey, and I'll tell you though, I definitely did my hair like that when I was I had the part right down the middle. I wanted that, so like the way he had, like, it was so greasy, but the way it like hung over his eyes, I thought that was so cool when I was a kid, and I really wanted that, but my hair just wouldn't react that way. Probably because I actually showered, and, and that character didn't. It was so greasy, you could see the grease, you could see it in the movie. But yeah, ultimately, I think the cast dynamics were better, though maybe not as probably shouldn't say this. Maybe not as iconic to some degree, but better in the second one.
All right. Interesting points. Steve, rebuttal?
I mean, I would move at this point for judgment so far, simply because he admitted that Scream 1 is more iconic, and we know how much you value that. So, motion for judgment on the plea.
I did not say this. Point of clarification, Your Honor. I said the cast might possibly be more iconic, not that the film is.
I think it's probably 6 to 1, half dozen the other. I mean,
you're giving me a lot to consider. It's interesting to hear because I'm a huge Scream fan. Jeff, I'm going to let you finish, but the arguments you're making are very interesting. I'll make a grander point about your arguments, but I want to hear all of Jeff's points. So Jeff,
he's going to take over at the end of this and be like, "You're both wrong. It's Scream 4." Judgment.
I promise I won't do that. I'll pick a movie tonight, but I don't want to step on Jeff's toes.
It would be like the opening of Scream 4. We're like watching a podcast of ourselves arguing about Scream 1 and Scream 2. But so for my second point, the first point is a good segue into this one. But, you know, because of what you mentioned at the top of the show, Nate, of how Ghostface could be anybody, I think then Scream itself, whatever version of it is, it becomes only as good as its villain, right? And Matthew Lillard, I think, carried a lot of weight. I think Skeet Ulrich was, despite my love for his hair in the 90s, I think one of my favorite things is in the movie Game Night, if any of you haven't seen it. If you've seen it, it's awesome. If you haven't seen it, you need to. It's a hilarious movie. But they're playing I can't remember what the name of the game is, but where you have a famous celebrity actor, whomever, and you have to give clues, and the other people name them, and you get points, etc. And he gets Skeet Ulrich, and he says he was in Supernatural, poor man's Johnny Depp.
Right.
And I was like, nailed it. That's perfect. So, and that's what he kind of feels like. And I think when you go to the second one and you have Timothy Olyphant, like Timothy Olyphant is just one of the single most like magnetic, charismatic actors I've ever seen. Not to say that he's like the best actor, but just his natural charisma that he has is unbelievable. It's in every movie, every TV show. You can't take your eyes off him. He just nails it. It's I don't know what it is. I mean, it's charisma. That's what it is. But it's it's amazing to see him go. And even at that young, I mean, we're just almost 30 years ago now. So even at that young age, he still had it. And he was able to bring that as a young actor to follow up, somebody like Matthew Lillard. But I think it also shows you the power of somebody like Timothy Olyphant when, they bring in Laurie Metcalf as Billy's mother in the second one. And so she helps Timothy Olyphant to do the killings and such. And it's like, that's kind of just like, I guess that's kind of a fun callback or whatever. But the real meat of it is Timothy Olyphant, who you can remove the Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich tandem and replace them with essentially just Timothy Olyphant because he's that good. He can give you what both those actors could with one person, and I would argue even doing it better because I love Matthew Lillard and I think he's hilarious, but he has that sort of goofy brand of humor that's kind of his own, and you can get some of that with Timothy Olyphant, but without having to go full Matthew Lillard. You never want to go full Matthew Lillard. And then you don't have to go as mopey as Skeet Ulrich either. But he can also give a little bit more of that sort of, kind of bad boy serious side that you were getting, or that at least was the intention, I believe, for the Skeet Ulrich character. So ultimately, I think Timothy Olyphant makes a better villain, even just as the one, even though you put, you have to consider the Laurie Metcalf aspect, but those two together with Oliphant carrying the majority of the weight, I think is better than the Lillard Skeet Ulrich duo.
Certainly a bold claim. Steve, do you have a response to that?
Well, I think, like you said, it's bold. It's too bold. It's a bridge too far, a step too far beyond the pale. I think ultimately you just got to decide what you like better. But I think the duality of the two of them, kind of the I don't want to say Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde because that's one guy kind of proves his point. So we're just going to pretend like you didn't hear that. Okay. Strike the record. But just the
Bonnie and
duality of
Clyde,
the
Laurel
two.
and Hardy.
Sure. There you go. The two of them together though kind of fit this hyperbolic world that we're inhabiting where everything's kind of like ramped up a little bit to silliness. Silliness is a little bit higher than the real world. Violence is a little bit higher. So they both really ham it up, and I think they do a good job playing off each other. Whereas Timothy Oliphant can't play off himself because that would just be crazy.
I bet he could do it though.
He probably could. He's quite talented.
He's a talented actor. Jeff, your final point.
My final point. So, and this actually kind of builds off a little bit something that Steve just kind of barely mentioned, but so we've talked throughout the season as excuse me, sequels that have sort of rehashed the original versus sequels that have built upon the original. Home Alone 2, we talked about, sort of rehashed the first one, just went bigger and better. Whereas, whether it's Aliens or Dark Knight or whatever, they've sort of Terminator is a big one, obviously, where they've expanded and grown the mythos, right? And what I think makes Scream 2 such a great sequel is because of this sort of hyper focus on the meta narrative of it. I think it's able to do both of those things. It's able to rehash the first movie, but then expand on everything within the front. Like Cotton Weary becomes a main character, not a main character, but a bigger character. It was just kind of a sort of faceless person in the first movie that we heard about. And then in the second one, he's a character and he adds a dynamic to it. And so you get this sort of expanding of the universe. You get Billy's mom, you get all this stuff, and how the events, the Woodsboro murders, how those could sort of percolate across the country and create a lot of these, what eventually end up being the movie sequels, but a lot of these sort of copycat killers. So you get that expansion, but then it also rehashes the first one, but because it's so specifically intending to be this sort of meta narrative, it plays upon the fact that it's rehashing, and it can do it very well because Kevin Williamson's a very talented writer. And so the fact that it can both rehash and build upon and do both of them equally well is, I think, something that makes it a very, very strong sequel. And it toes a line that's really hard to toe, and that I don't know, there's not many that can do it the same. So ultimately, if you put the movies side by side, I think that's what ultimately makes Scream 2 such a good sequel and the better film overall.
I have some questions for you, but I want to give Steve an opportunity to respond to anything there.
Let's go ahead and hear the questions. I want to see what you have. You're the Scream master here.
I am the Scream master.
Queen. You're our resident Scream Queen.
The arguments you both used are interesting. As a huge fan of Scream, I don't know if I would have. Both of you kind of went some routes I would have gone, but I'm going to ask you about
he's
maybe
telling us we're morons, Jeff. He's like,
I'm going to
that's what I'm hearing.
I'm going to ask you both. I'm going to ask you both about maybe some things that I would have used as my arguments. There is no Scream movie without an iconic opening murder. It's kind of a signature aspect of these films. I would like you both to maybe talk about why you're the opening. I would think both equally iconic, and iconography is a big deal to me. Steve, we'll start with you. Why is the opening scene in which Drew Barrymore, playing Casey Becker, is killed. Why is that more iconic than the opening of Scream 2? Steve, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Well, I mean, when it comes to iconography, is there anything more iconic in horror than, do you want to play a game, or what does he say? Do you like scary movies? That's
War Games. Do you want to play a game? Different movie.
You're right.
Would you like to
so
play
so
a
iconic
game?
I got it wrong. But what the worst part is, I just watched this like a couple hours ago. Shows you how much it's stuck in my head. But my mental ability to remember iconic things notwithstanding, I think it's safe to say that opening scene is like a horror movie icon. Like, it's right up there with the shower scene from Psycho. I mean, it's up there with all kinds of scenes in history of horror. And honestly, that's why I didn't bring it up, because I thought it'd be unfair. I thought we didn't want to try to bring up, things that were, because the second one has a great opening as well, but it's it's trying to build on and top what it did in the first one. So how can you argue with perfection? That's what I would say.
Jeff, your arguments for the opening murder of Scream 2.
So it's hard to argue against the iconography of the first one. However, that is what I'm charged with doing, and so I will do it. And you could make the argument that I will make now, that as iconic as it is with the phone call, you could say it's even a little derivative, because it's not the first movie to use a sort of phone call aspect as its sort of device to lure us in, with the and God, I'm blanking on the name of the movie, but the call is coming from inside the house.
When a stranger calls. When a stranger calls.
Thank you. So it's kind of a play on that. Now, Scream's whole deal is that it's playing off horror movies, so I don't think that was a sort of unintentional thing. But if I'm tasked with arguing against it, there's an argument against it. And then as for the second one, what I think makes maybe the second opening perhaps more skillful than the first is how it took the idea of, by the way, watching the second one, been a long time since I'd seen it, and that opening, it hits quite a bit different in modern day than even it did at the time. Because at the time, I mean, we had hardly even had any school shootings in America, but we definitely hadn't had any movie theater shootings, which we have absolutely had since then. Dark Knight Rises was the first major one that I recall. So, and that was 2012, and there have been a few more since. So, seeing somebody get stabbed to death in a movie theater in front of everyone, kind of, especially when you've heard the stories of the shooter in the Dark Knight Rises, wearing a Batman mask and all this stuff. So it's it hits a little bit different. But so you could almost argue that it was sort of almost predictive in a bad way, but it the thought process behind, okay, how is something like this going to would actually work in the real world, turned out to be truer than probably the writers would have liked. And the fact that you have this murder that's happening in this theater in front of everyone, when they've all got these fake knives and they've all got the masks on, and they're all cheering, and they think it's part of the show when she gets up on stage, and then it's not, and they slowly realize, and everyone just kind of gets really quiet and stares at her, but still does nothing. It's a commentary on how we view violence in our society, on how we view, I mean, there might even be some context with violence against women, violence against minorities, because there's famously not a lot of minorities in Scream, at least the first few ones. So it was something that I think, even though it might not be as iconic just because it's hard to top that, I think the skill and the thought put into it is better than the first.
Great points. I have one more question before we get to final arguments. Jeff, I'll start with you on this one, just so I can kind of give you each equal opportunity to kind of think about your response a little more. So you had a little more time that time, so I'll give Steve more opportunity this time. So Jeff, I'll throw this one right back to you. Neither of you, criminally, by the way, neither of you brought up the towering performance of Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott.
I thought for a second you were going to say David Arquette, but
the towering performance of David Arquette. Just to speak a little bit about Sidney Prescott as a character, Neve Campbell's portrayal of her, just any additional thoughts that you have about that. Obviously, her character and her portrayal of that character carry this franchise for the most part. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Jeff, I'll start with you.
Well, with Neve Campbell, what we get is, and this is one of the biggest tropes that I think the movie, specifically at least the first two Scream movies, really play off of, and that is, the final girl trope, starting with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then up until Scream, it was essentially just that, the final girl, the one that sort of survived. And that's pretty much, what they always did, was just sort of survive. Sometimes there might be some question as to whether the killer was actually killed or not or whatever. But what made it a little bit unique is how she was able to not only fight back, but save the day, save herself and others without needing the help of a man or some sort of divine intervention or something like that. It was just, here's a woman who put in this situation, and instead of just surviving, she's actually able to fight back a little bit. And even though I like horror movies, I'm not an expert, so I'm sure there was probably one before that where some final girl did something else. But going back to like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, she just gets in the car, she gets in the truck, and she drives away, and that's it. She just survives. That's the final girl. But and then when you get into the second one with Neve Campbell, then what I think makes her performance good in the second one as well is that you really do get an appreciation for how hardened she is from the events that have happened to her. And this is a thing with a lot of horror movies. You don't get a lot of, especially like series, you don't get a ton of crossover between characters. In Friday the 13th, the final girl from the original who escapes Camp Crystal Lake, she comes back for the second one, but she gets killed early on. That just, she's gone, and etc. They don't none of the characters in Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, returned in the second one. Well, that's not true. I haven't seen the second one in a long time, but you could argue Kirsty in Hellraiser was sort of fought back, but not to the same degree. But anyway, point being, I think that because in the first movie, Neve Campbell is her character is pretty meek. She's very scarred by what happened to her mother shortly before the movie takes place, and she has to get tougher and she has to grow as the movie goes on. And then in the second one, you can see how that's impacted her. It would be pretty easy to just come back and sort of play the same character. But she plays a character who's still impacted by this trauma, but is made stronger by it. And you see that in how she reacts all the way through the second one, specifically like whether she thinks it's actually the Jerry O'Connell boyfriend or not, she's been close enough to know, what, fuck this. we're over. We're putting a pause until all this is figured out, and that's her initiating that and being like, no, because he's like, do I get a say in this? And she's like, no, you don't. This is my decision. And that's refreshing, especially in the 90s. So, I think Neve Campbell's performance in Scream is pretty unique. and is one thing that sort of, there's other characters in other franchises like the Kirsty and Hellraiser and the final girl in Nightmare on Elm Street. She does come back in subsequent movies a little bit, but so there are other characters that sort of come back through the franchises, but I don't think there's any that are tied to the franchise in the same way that Nev Campbell is to Scream.
Good response. Steve, your thoughts on Nev Campbell as Sidney Prescott?
I don't know that I can top that. That was all very well spoken. And it all equally applies to the first episode or the first movie. So aside from the parts where he talks about the second movie.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't really an advocation for either movie being better, just for her performance throughout the series.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wasn't really.
Can I just
it
say
helped
what
both our causes, I think.
If we were doing franchises
and that's,
franchises, that's a hell of a closer right there.
That's true, and that's part of why I wasn't gonna bring up Nev Campbell specifically in her performance, because it's like, anything I would have said, Steve would have just been like, oh, well, she's also great in the first one. And it's like, well, yeah. True. So what are you going to do?
Well, with that, I will go to any closing arguments or thoughts. And as always, we start with the original film and do the sequel. So Steve, if you would like to give us any closing thoughts about why Scream is the superior film.
Well, it really just, it comes down to iconography, baby. The first one is a classic. It is a classic of horror, movie, horror moviedom. Or I guess I don't know how you want to say that. My brain's not working tonight, guys. I'm sorry. But it's up there, man. Scream, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, it is kind of not one of a kind, but it launched a franchise. It revitalized horror, as you said at the beginning. And the second one's great, but it didn't do that. It's just more of the same, and I think it just tries to kind of one up itself. Whereas the first one just kind of launched a whole renaissance, which I think is probably kind of against the rules of how we've been arguing this all year. But you know what? We're 2 episodes away from the end, so I'm pulling out all the stops.
Okay. Jeff, your closing arguments.
Well, so when I look at these two movies, one of the things that I think is the most interesting about Scream 2, and I've already kind of talked about how part of what makes it great is that it's both a rehash and an expansion on the first one. But beyond that, when there is, like, when I rewatched the first one, I think I had forgotten like how brutal the first one is in terms of violence. The like that opening scene, as iconic as it is, it's also very gruesome. The boyfriend has his guts torn open and they're all splayed out there on the chair. And then there's the point where the Drew Barrymore character, Casey, I think is her name, she, is stabbed multiple times. And then her parents come home and she's screaming for them, but her throat or whatever, she can't like make the sounds, so they don't know she's there. And then they're dragging her by her feet as she's, holding this phone, and the mom can hear it. Like, that's some pretty horrific stuff. And and then she's hanging from a tree by her neck with her stomach split open and all her guts hanging out. It's pretty violent stuff, and some of the other kills get that way as well. But it still had that sort of patented Scream dialogue and sort of humor as part of it. And so I think it was pretty clear that when they were going towards Scream 2, they had the choice of, okay, do we keep going down this route of, the brutal kills and the violence and focusing on that, or do we lean a little bit more into the interactions between the characters, when they're not being killed, and how that sort of enriches the story. And they decided to go that route more than they did the sort of, not to say that of course every horror movie is going to have some kills, some violence, some things like that, but The second one definitely didn't quite reach the same level as the first. And I think that was a conscious choice by them. And I think it's one that's why the franchise took off. So while you may not be able to match the iconography of the first one, I think the decisions they made in the second one for the franchise itself are a big part of why it took off and became what you said, Steve, of one of the I mean, there's definitely an argument for Mount Rushmore of uh, slasher film and villains. You know, there's an argument for the Scream and Ghostface to be up there with the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacres. You know, even over my beloved Hellraiser, you could make that argument. And I think a lot of that is because that second movie came in and it knew what its audience was and what made the first movie successful, and it built on that in a way that allowed the franchise to keep moving forward and to keep people engaged. And I think that's what the second one did very well, and what makes the second one ultimately better.
This is about as evenly argued as I can recall of an episode that I've been the judge. You both did a really, really good job. So, and it puts me in a very difficult position because I have an opinion here, but I do really want to base, who wins the episode based on the arguments. So it's very, very difficult. And again, I think you both argued it I think you argued it equally. I think there's one small point that's going to put one over the other for me. I am going to go with the original Scream tonight. The reason, and again, you both gave really good arguments. Jeff, I think Steve's very first point was Stu and Billy. That to me is kind of what weighted it the most. Jeff, I think you are underselling Skeet Ulrich and the performance and the whole thing in the kitchen with them stabbing each other and just the madness of that. I think maybe
That was carried by Matthew Lillard. That whole scene was carried by Matthew Lillard.
I don't know.
I'm getting a little woozy here. Like that, every iconic line you can think of from that scene is all from Matthew Lillard.
Well, the one that I think of is when he's like, "Where are you, bitch?" And he the phone slips out of his hands, and I guess this actually was an ad lib line that when Matthew Lillard goes, "Yeah, hit me with the phone,
oh yeah,
will
you? Dick."
Apparently, that was actually ad lib, like that he accidentally let go of the phone. No, Matthew Lillard is great. I just think that I don't know. There's something about sort of the general insanity of that. I think Timothy Olyphant is a great actor. I think he's great in Scream 2. I'm not sure he is so great that he is of an equal level to both of those killers in the first film. So that is maybe I completely agree about what you both said about Randy Meeks. I think Steve, you're right that sort of kind of side character, but really informs the plot a lot. Whereas, Jeff, I think you make an interesting point that in some ways, he has more screen time and he's a little bit stronger of a character in part two. I think those are great. I think what you both said about the openings as well, Jeff. I won't hold as much against you that the opening of the original Scream is going to be more iconic, and there's not much you can do about that. But for me, it's going to come down to who are the best ghost faces. And for Steve to start his argument with, it's Stu and Billy. Like, this is argument number one. I'm going to lean toward the original Scream tonight and say it's the original Scream. And so that is my final verdict. Scream.
Have I ever told you... Sorry, I thought you were done. My bad.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, have I ever told you how smart you are? And looking devilishly handsome this evening as well.
Well, thank you. Yes. That I will say you guys argued that very evenly. So, and I think they're both great movies. I think that, and Jeff, you brought this up a little bit as well. I think a really interesting aspect of part two is the Cotton Weary character. who's played by how do you say his name? Liv Schreiber.
Schreiber. Yeah.
He's in the first movie in a non-speaking role. You only see him in like archive like TV footage of the trial of Cotton Weary, and I thought it was really cool, to get that actor back and then kind of make him this character in the second one is kind of interesting. Jeff, I was surprised you didn't bring up Stab, the movie within a movie. Um, that they are there, which I think is one of the more interesting aspects of Scream 2. And also kind of launched, they refer to like the Stab series throughout the franchise. So maybe that was a little bit of an argument that you left on the floor there. And I will say also, Steve, I'm surprised that you left on the floor the iconic opening. I don't that I'm surprised.
It's been done. I mean, it itself pretty much launched a whole parody series in scary movies. So like, I don't know, it
Yeah,
felt it was low hanging fruit, and I didn't want to go there.
I think that maybe we underestimate. And again, I was young when it came out. I think that the fact that Drew Barrymore was an A-list star at the time and she gets murdered in the first scene,
That was a huge deal.
that was a big deal. The way it's written, the way that so the popcorn popping on the stove that kind of matches the intensity of the scene, the subtle you know, what's your name? She, what? Why do you want to know? Because I want to know who I'm looking at. And there's just this sort of zoom in on her. She goes, "What'd you say?" And he goes, "I want to know who I'm talking to." That's not what you said. It's the way it's written, and it just ups the tension, ups the tension. Um,
I feel like your line delivery was better than how it actually goes down. It's a hot take, but I don't think these are great movies. And I think the line readings themselves and some of the dialogue is just really bad. Now, obviously, history has proven me the outlier here, but
well, I'm a great actor too, and so I think that when
some
people
of
look
this
for line
is
readings,
I'm actually kind of with you, Steve. I think they're
More of
entertaining and they're fine in terms of horror movies. But if I'm going to a horror movie or even or a slasher, the sort of horror subgenre of slasher movies, um, I'm going through a few different ones before I get to Scream, personally. But again, it's not that I don't like it, but just
I think
we're
you're
saying
both.
your tastes are trash.
I think you're. I think you know what? Fuck it. You both lose. I take back what I said.
Scream 4.
Scream 4 is the winner.
No, I think. Yeah, I mean, they're certainly not forever. And I think, well, one thing to you guys' point that I think is important. I'm not a big fan of horror films, so I think there maybe is a little bit of an appeal. I think maybe something that I think maybe something that the Scream franchise does well is it does pull a little bit of appeal to people who maybe do not traditionally go for horror films. And so I will give it that I'm admitting that I'm not one of those people and that Scream is absolutely my favorite horror franchise. I mean, it's one of those franchises for me. It's like Pirates of the Caribbean. Like they could make 20 of those and I'll go see every single one of them because I just like going back to that world. Like with full acknowledgement that they're not very good. And so, the Scream movies are like that with me. I just like going back to that world. And so
I think some of this also sorry.
No, go ahead.
We don't have much chemistry tonight. We gotta.
Yeah, I know. We're talking all over each other. What? I don't know.
Kevin Williamson did not write our podcast tonight. But I think some of this also, at least from my vantage point, is I didn't see these movies until 2022, 2023. I'd seen multiple scary movies before. You know what I mean? I've seen the things that are making fun of these movies because they're so iconic. So that's probably a big reason why I feel the way I do. But
well, and I remember when Scary Movie came out, the first one, I went and saw it, and it was definitely hitting on a lot of the Scream stuff, but it was even at the time, I remember it felt a little weird because it was making fun of a movie that was also in a way making fun of horror movies. So it's like, what are you poking fun at? Scary Movie, and then which is why with the other Scary Movie 2 was more about the haunted house genre than it was, trying to just follow the Scream and all that. So, yeah, that was. I remember thinking that was kind of interesting.
I think we underestimate the context this movie was, and maybe the fact that it needs all these arguments is maybe an argument against its greatness, but I think to put it into the historical context of horror films were nothing but just derivative sequel after sequel after sequel. You have a brand new movie. It has well-known young stars, which that itself was kind of a different thing. It comes out at Christmas. So they drop this at like a really weird time of the year. It gets super positive word of mouth. Like it spreads via word of mouth. You have the idea, that it's someone they know. Like it's not just some mindless killer. It's a mystery. It's someone that they know. It's two killers. That's a unique thing. I think there's just all these unique aspects of it that when you put that into a 1996 world of what horror films were like, I mean, I it really reinvent. I did a TikTok. I'm real big on this because I did a TikTok about it a few months ago where I talk about like it really reinvented not just scary movies as like in the way they're written, but the economy of scary movies. Like 2 years before this movie comes out, the highest grossing horror film of like 1994 or something was Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, which was like the eighth Friday the 13th movie. 4 years after this movie comes out, what's the highest grossing horror film? The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis, an A-list star. Like the idea that you would get A-list stars to be in horror films. I mean, look at the cast of It. Look at these actors who've carried the Conjuring franchise. These like serious actors. The idea that horror movies could be
I know what you did last
serious.
summer.
Yep. The idea that you could get big actors in these movies and just make the movies a little bit better instead of producing them really cheaply, you could put more money into them and make them good and draw, get scripts that draw legitimate talent, and horror movies could kind of be a serious thing. I think a lot of it is a credit to these movies. So that's
Yeah,
that's my rant.
There was a run there where like because if you if you think back to the 80s, right? You think the 80s is the sort of rise of that horror slasher movie. That's where, Friday the like Texas Chainsaw Massacre was the 70s, but sort of went into the 80s. But then, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser, like all those other ones were big time in the 80s. And then, like you said earlier in the show, they were falling off. But then there was also like the comedy genre, right? Like you had all these sort of um the comedies in the 80s of a lot of these like Caddyshack and Meatballs and things like that, and that sort of peaked and then started petering out, and then this Scream really sort of started this revolution, and then it I would argue that it even permeated into other genres because then you think like a movie like American Pie a couple years later becomes successful, and I think Scream lays the groundwork for that. Like, okay, we can reinvent this stuff, we can do new comedies, or we can take a genre that we think is spent and we can redo it, get younger people, add a little bit more production value, and turn it into something that people are going to want to see. And even something like the Blair Witch Project and things like that, that all, I think there's an argument that Scream sort of definitely lays the groundwork for all of that in the late 90s, which then sort of puts us on the path to essentially where we are today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, I just think that the idea that horror films could be taken seriously. And don't get me wrong, there are still horror films that are produced very cheaply today and they're just trying to get a quick buck. But a lot of horror films are kind of like, I mean, I brought up the Conjuring universe. I mean, that's an entire universe of sort of like, dare I say, kind of high art, film pieces that are scary movies that are made with a really high production value. And you look at a movie like Sinister,
Hereditary, one of my favorite movies of all
Hereditary,
time.
um,
Midsummer, a
Midsummer,
lot of those. Yeah.
like all these movies are like they're very complex art pieces where horror is being taken seriously as a genre, and I just kind of feel like a lot of that can be. I mean, if you look at the horror films that were coming out in the early 1990s, there is a line that you can draw, and it starts with when the first Scream is released, and it completely changes the economy of horror films. So I will say though, there's a very interesting internet. I did our poll. Would you guys like to know the results of this?
And internet. There's an
And one of the series of
on the
tubes told
interwebs.
me on the interwebs, on both Instagram and TikTok.
Okay.
And I was really surprised by this. On Instagram and TikTok, the most overwhelming win, 95% to 5% for the original Scream.
Holy shit.
And I was really surprised that that movie, like Scream 2 is pretty good. Like I was really surprised that this one of all the weeks we've had was the most overwhelmingly weighted toward one of the movies.
That's pretty stunning, yeah.
That is stunning, yeah.
And I got a lot of, I mean, I got like between Instagram and TikTok, I got like 100 votes. So, I mean, it's literally like 95 to 5.
Wow. That's rough.
Wow.
So I don't know what people are thinking necessarily. But if you're out there, we appreciate you voting.
Yeah.
But you seem to certainly have an opinion on this. And, you know, we're happy that you have the opinion. Yeah, 95 to 5 on both of them.
That's crazy. Yeah, I would definitely not would have thought that.
I would not have thought that either. But that, however, settles the debate, I think, between the audience polling and our decision tonight. Now, next week, we have a very exciting episode. We're going to do something different.
Ooh, boy.
This entire season, you've been hearing a judge, this week me, hear the arguments of two of our counselors. We're going to bring our producer Brandon in next week because we are, and there's some applause for Brandon, and dare I say he deserves it.
It's not good that I found the soundboard.
Brandon is going to be the judge because we are going to do a trifecta, if you will. We are going to be looking at the Toy Story franchise, minus Toy Story 4, which sucks. We are going to be looking at the Toy Story franchise, and we're going to be grading Toy Stories 1, 2, and 3. And each of your typical competitors here are going to take one of those films. So that is going to be our last episode of the season, and it is going to be very exciting.
We're going to call it the Toy Story Megasode.
Oh, my God. Toy Story Megasode.
Episode.
Yeah. Tell us, before we even get there, where are we at? Jeff, I saw you marked it on the sheet. Where are we at between originals and sequels? What are we at?
7 to 6 original. Takes the Scream has broken the tie. After the big
Toy
run
Story's
of
got
sequels
2 shots to tie it up.
And
here.
Toy Story's got 2 shots. I mean, guys, this could be one for. I feel like we need to say this every season. Every season, we're not doing this on purpose. We are not. We are not arranging these seasons so that it's always really close at the end, and it's like a tie at the end, and it comes down to the last week. I swear we're not doing that.
I really promise we're not. I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know.
I think in all seriousness, I think it's a credit to how we curate these films and the ones that we pick. I think there's a little bit to that.
I've always said we're geniuses.
I'm a great actor.
It started off looking like it was going to be a runaway for the originals because they won 5 out of the first 6.
And then,
so if we were going to schedule it in a certain way, we would do it a little bit more evenly than that if we were intentional.
And then the sequels just went on a tear. On a tear. So next week, last episode of the season. Then we may do a little extra fun episode. We haven't decided yet, but our last official episode of the season will be next week. That'll be episode 14. We are Duel of the Greats. You can find us on social media at Duel of the Greats everywhere except for TikTok, where we are at Duel Podcast. If you're one of our long-term listeners, if you're one of our fan out there, thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate it. We love you, Guy. And we hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And always send us an email. Send us an email. Say again, Brandon?
What about Steve's mom?
Steve's mom.
We've got
our friend Sam. We got at least 3, of course.
That's 3 fans, baby.
Nicholas Rizzi, as Rizzi Vision has
shout him
shown,
out.
if you send us an email, we'll probably read it. So, I mean, if that's, this is one of the funniest things we've ever read. I don't know if we're going to top that, but send us an email and we might talk about it on the show. And we will catch.
Say his TikTok again.
His TikTok again.
Yeah, that's
Rizzi Vision.
That's not some clever nickname you came up with on the spot. That's
Rizzi Vision. He is at Rizzi Visions. That's RIZZI Vision. And he is there on TikTok and Instagram. His TikTok has some really funny stand-up bits that he does. I don't know if he does that as a career, but he is a stand-up comedian. And he has some really great bits that we were sharing back and forth throughout the week amongst ourselves. So Rizzi Vision, check him out. And we will check all of you next week when we talk about the Toy Story trilogy. For Duel of the Greats, we will see you next week.